Tonight at 10, His Majesty the King and the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff discuss bilateral military cooperation and regional developments. The Prime Minister says Jordan response platform for the Syrian crisis is a call for collective work to deal with the aftermath of the worst humanitarian catastrophe since World War II. Israel beefs up its military forces with roadblocks being set up in Palestinian neighborhoods in occupied East Jerusalem, hoping to calm violence. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King received the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, who is visiting as a part of a regional tour. Talks during the meeting dealt with the Jordanian-U.S. military ties as well as developments in the Middle East. The meeting was attended by His Royal Highness Prince Faisal bin Hussein, the Royal Court Chief, the King's Advisor for Military Affairs and other officials. Earlier, the King's Military Advisor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mashal Zibin, welcomed General Dunford for a discussion of cooperation between the two countries and other regional and international issues. Tunisian President Baji Qad Sibsi will begin a state visit to Jordan tomorrow upon an invitation by His Majesty the King. The two leaders will hold talks on bilateral ties and the latest regional and international developments. During his two-day visit, Sibsi will also meet with other senior officials. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour chaired the 8th meeting of the Jordan Response Platform for the Syrian Crisis. Jordan Response Platform for the Syrian Crisis 2016 and 2018 was launched during the meeting at an estimated cost of $8.2 billion spread over 11 vital sectors. Mansour told the meeting the Syrian crisis is internationally recognized as the worst ever humanitarian catastrophe the world had seen since the Second World War. He said the response platform is a call for collective work to shoulder repercussions of the crisis. Jordan, he said, backed a political resolution of the Syrian conflict based on reforms and giving all Syrians a role in rebuilding their country. He said while some refugees will choose other destinations, the majority of them are likely to remain in countries neighboring Syria that have generously welcomed them for the past 5 years.
The Jordan response plan for the Syria crisis 2016-2018 is a call for collective action to better support host countries. From the outset, the government of Jordan has sought to develop a fitting response to the array of critical issues brought on by the crisis, including those of political, macroeconomic, social cohesion and stability, alongside the stress placed on national and local institutions and budgets, while also sustaining services and support to the combined refugee and hosting populations.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign and Expansion Affairs Nasser Jude discussed with Swiss Foreign Minister Didier Burkhalter cooperation between Jordan and Switzerland and challenges facing the Middle East. Efforts to combat terrorism and extremism, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the crisis in Syria, Iraq, Yemen and Libya were also discussed. The Swiss minister also visited the Azraq refugee camp and expressed his country's interest in increasing its support to Syrian refugees in Jordan. He said Switzerland was specifically interested in supporting education and water programs.
Well, it is a very pragmatic visit. We are here to help and to give help and assistance. We are very much interested in both in two things: young people, education, and water. And we have been watching what happens here, and it is well organized with good organizations and good support of the Jordanian government, and we are very much interested in investing more.
Israel has boosted its occupation forces in East Jerusalem and across the West Bank. Hundreds of troops were also deployed in Israeli cities, and roadblocks were set up in Palestinian neighborhoods of Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu encouraged Israeli civilians with gun license to carry their weapons for possible attacks by Palestinians. Here's more.
More military measures as Israel tightens its grip on occupied East Jerusalem and across the West Bank. The Israeli military had set up roadblocks in Palestinian neighborhoods in Arab East Jerusalem and deployed soldiers across the country following a wave of Palestinian knife attacks. In the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Isawiyah, Palestinian residents have to pass through heavily guarded roadblocks.
Everything that happens is because of the occupation. If the occupation didn't exist, none of this would have happened. Every day the students don't know how to reach the school and they don't get education. Workers, sick people. In the morning a sick woman was going to the hospital. They didn't let her through, so she died.
Israeli civil rights activists also criticized Israel's crackdown on Palestinians.
Even when the police do take measures, this needs to be in accordance with Israeli law. We think what the police are doing now is not legitimate. Blocking off 350,000 people from driving across East Jerusalem is not a legitimate mean. Checking each and every student that comes out of Isawiyah, every school student, is not a legitimate measure.
The security measures were also enforced against Arabs inside Israel. At least 4 Israeli cities, including the commercial capital Tel Aviv, have temporarily banned Arab laborers from working in their schools. The move was described as racist by Israeli Arabs. Arab member of the Israeli Knesset, Ayman Odeh, called it incitement against Arab communities inside Israel. He says the Arab citizens know how to struggle in legitimate civil ways. Despite Israel's heavy-handed clampdown, tensions across the Palestinian lands remain. There had been widespread clashes between Palestinians and Israeli troops over the past weeks, which were triggered by Palestinians' anger over increased Jewish assaults against Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, Islam's third holiest site. The violence has mostly occurred in Jerusalem and the West Bank, but it has also erupted along the Gaza-Israel border and in Israel. The almost 3 weeks of violence has killed 41 Palestinians and 8 Israelis. Rad Bush for the news at 10.
Rebels battling the Syrian army and its allies near Aleppo said they received new supplies of US-made anti-tank missiles from states opposed to President Bashar al-Assad. The rebels from 3 groups said new supplies had arrived since the start last week of a major offensive by the Syrian army backed up by the Russian airstrikes. Here's more.
There is no let-up in Russian airstrikes in Syria. Since the start of Moscow's air campaign, ground offensives by the Syrian army and its allies have mostly hit areas controlled by insurgent groups other than Daesh in parts of western Syria. Russia's defense ministry announced that Russian planes carried out 33 sorties and hit 49 Daesh targets over the past 24 hours. It said a command point of al-Nusra was destroyed in Idlib province. A Ministry of spokesman also said Russian airstrikes resulted in a mass retreat of Daesh in the Damascus province.
Precise usage of Russian military jets in Damascus province resulted in a fundamental change in the tactical situation in this area. Daesh fighters suffering from acute lack of ammunition are leaving their positions en masse. According to reconnaissance, only in the course of last night, several large groups of about 100 fighters each abandoned their positions and moved in the direction of Marj Sultan.
The Russian Defense Ministry had released videos showing Russian airstrikes over Syria. It showed what it said was a strike on an ammunition depot to the west of Jebel Zarous in Hama province. Another showed what it said was a strike on militant workshops near Sarmania in Idlib province. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said he will hold a meeting this week in Europe with counterparts from Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Russia to explore options for a political transition in Syria. He also discussed the fight against Daesh during his meeting with his Spanish counterpart, Garcia Margallo.
The campaign against Daesh will require a multi-year commitment. But as we have learned both in my country and in Spain, defeating terrorists is not an option, it is a necessity.
Amid Russia's intensive air campaign, the Syrian insurgent group Nur al-Din al-Zinki announced that its commander was killed. It said Nassif Ismail was killed in fighting raging in southern Aleppo, where a major ground offensive by Syrian army troops seeking to regain rebel-held territory made some progress with the help of Russian bombers. Hiba Lartoum for the News at 10.
Egyptians largely stayed away from parliamentary elections for a second day. Prime Minister Sharif Ismail said the turnout on the first day of voting yesterday was just 15 to 16%, but should rise after public sector workers were given a half day off to vote. Estimates by judges overseeing the ballots suggested turnout had risen to 20% or more by the afternoon. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has hailed the election as a milestone on the road to democracy, but his critics have branded them as a sham. In Alexandria, the governor ordered that public transport to be offered from 1 p.m. until the polls close at 9 p.m. to encourage people to vote. Elderly supporters of Sisi comprise a large proportion of those turning out to vote, while younger Egyptians boycotted the election for a chamber they say will just rubber stamp the president's decisions. In Giza, security was tight outside a polling station as Egypt continues to face an Islamist militant insurgency. Back here at home, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour inaugurated the second expansion project at a wastewater treatment plant near Al-Zarqa, east of Amman. The project, carried out at a cost of $184 million, will have an output capacity of 365,000 cubic meters of treated water per day. The US-funded expansion scheme of the Al-Samra wastewater treatment plant will provide the kingdom with 133 million cubic meters of treated water annually, accounting for over 10% of the country's water resources. Minister of Water and Irrigation Hazem Al Nasser called the plant one of the country's most important ventures and said it is part of the government's efforts to upgrade the water supply and sanitation services. CEO of the US government's Millennium Challenge Corporation, Dana Hyde, said her corporation and the Millennium Challenge account Jordan are working together with the Jordanian government to conserve the country's water supply and improve water quality for families and businesses.
Jordan is among the most water-scarce countries in the world, and the situation is only getting worse. Overuse, pollution, a changing climate, and an influx of refugees from its neighbors are putting an even greater strain on Jordan's already scarce water resources. So for more than 60 years, USAID and other US agencies have worked with the Jordanian government and our international partners to expand and conserve Jordan's water resources. The agency that I have the pleasure to lead, the US government's Millennium Challenge Corporation, is building on those efforts. In 2011, we partnered with Jordan and we committed $275 million over 5 years to help it ensure a water-secure future.
The Prime Minister welcomed US Millennium Challenge Corporation CEO Dana Hyde to discuss cooperation between Jordan and the US agency. They talked about water projects being implemented in the kingdom with the support of the Millennium Challenge Corporation. Mansour stressed that the government will sustain cooperation with the corporation and promote its activities in the kingdom. He spoke about the impact of the Syrian crisis on Jordan, as the kingdom housed about 1.4 million Syrian refugees who have placed increasing pressure on the kingdom's vital resources, including water. The U.S. official said the Samra second expansion project is a success story in the Millennium Challenge Corporation's relations with the Jordanian government. I noted that Jordan last year won Best State Award for implementing projects funded by the Millennium Challenge Corporation. A typhoon swept across the northern Philippines, killing at least 9 people. The storm toppled trees, power lines and walls as flood waters spread far from the riverbeds, but tens of thousands of people were evacuated. Here's more.
At least 9 people are dead and thousands of others displaced by a massive storm system sweeping across the northern Philippines. Typhoon Kopu has been downgraded to a Category 1 typhoon and was forecast to weaken still to a tropical storm. But flooding has already caused massive damages and resulted in the evacuations of tens of thousands. The National Disaster Agency said 2 people died from falling trees and a toppled concrete wall. Coast Guard said 7 others died at sea. Civil defense officials say local rescue units need help. They need assistance in search and retrieval operations, this official said. They also need help with food and distribution. The non-stop rainfall has caused severe flooding in several provinces in Luzon, damaging roads and bridges and cutting power and communication lines. The National Disaster Agency has yet to release data on the full extent of the damages. Officials have said they fear the death toll may rise. An average of 20 typhoons hit the Philippines every year.
An American aerial dance troupe made its Chinese mainland debut during Shanghai's annual International Arts Festival, offering what looks like a combination of ballet and wall climbing. The show, including the beautiful movements and vivid music people would expect from a dance performance, but it was all happening in the air. Many viewers on the ground sat stunned, looking up into the sky at 4 dancers intertwining with each other. Champions League holders FC Barcelona trained in Spain before flying to Belarus to play Bate Borisov tomorrow. Alexander Yarmokovic's team will try to prevent Barca taking a landslide win like the last time they met in the tournament's group stage. Barca tops Group E with 4 points, while Bate has 3 points after defeating AS Rome last month. Barcelona coach Luis Enrique Martinez will be missing Lionel Messi, Andres Iniesta and Rafinha. To sailing, Artemis Racing finished with a win at the Americans Cup World Series Regatta in Bermuda. In the final race, however, it was Team New Zealand who earned first place points, crossing the finish line well ahead of the Land Rover Bar team to give them enough points to jump up to second place in the regatta. Artemis could do no better than 4th place in the final race, just behind the SoftBank Japan boat, but it was enough to give them a 2-point victory over Team New Zealand in Bermuda. Now the weather outlook fair across much of the country tonight, with a chance for light thundery showers in the central, eastern and southern regions. A slight drop in temperatures tomorrow will create pleasant weather across much of the hilly areas, with a continued chance for a light rain, especially across the country's south. Hot weather is forecast for much of the Jordan Valley and the Gulf of Aqaba, with highs still touching the 35-degree mark there. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here are our top stories once again. His Majesty the King and the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff discuss bilateral military cooperation and regional developments. The Prime Minister says Jordan response platform for the Syrian crisis is a call for collective work to deal with the aftermath of the worst humanitarian catastrophe since World War II. Israel beefs up its military forces with roadblocks being set up in Palestinian neighborhoods in the occupied East Jerusalem, hoping to calm violence. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Louay Balkher. Thank you for watching and have a good night.